My husband had been gone only 13 days when my son-in-law walked into our attorney's office like grief was just a door he had to step over before collecting what he thought was his. My daughter sat beside him without meeting my eyes, and his mother looked around the room like she was already measuring my house for new curtains. I was 68. Still wearing the pearl earrings my husband gave me when our life was simpler, and every person at that table seemed to believe age had made me easy to move aside. Then my son-in-law tapped his folder and said, "Let's not drag this out. The cottages and the waterfront land should pass to us." The attorney didn't argue. She only opened one sealed file, placed it flat on the table, and said, those properties were no longer in his estate when he passed. For the first time that morning, his smile broke. His mother stopped whispering, and my daughter finally looked up, not with concern for me, but with panic for the future her husband had promised her. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just sat there and watched the truth reach them slowly. My husband had seen their greed long before they showed it in public, and what he left behind was not a fortune for them to grab. It was a trap built from patience, love, and one final act of protection. I've always wondered which betrayal cuts deeper, the person trying to take from you or the child who sits beside them and says nothing. What would you have noticed first at that table?
My name is Marion Calder. I am 68 years old, and until my husband's estate meeting, I kept telling myself my daughter Sophie had not turned against me. She had only married a man who liked to stand too close to other people's money. Walter and I had lived nearly 40 years in Briarport, a small coastal town where the air smelled like salt and wet wood every morning. Our house was not fancy in the way rich people like to show off. It had scratched floors, old porch chairs, and a kitchen table with one leg Walter fixed 3 times because I refused to throw it away. But we had built something solid: 3 rental cottages near the pier, 2 small storefronts downtown, and a strip of waterfront land developers had been chasing for years. Grant knew about all of it because Sophie knew about all of it, and after he saw an old draft of Walter's will in a folder one Thanksgiving, he started treating our future like it already belonged to him. At first, he was careful. He brought wine, carried grocery bags, and called me Mrs. Calder with that smooth voice people use when they want credit for manners they do not feel. Then Walter got sick, and Grant's visits changed. He stopped asking how Walter was sleeping and started asking where the deeds were kept, whether the cottages were still in Walter's name, and whether at our age, simple paperwork would make things easier for everyone. Sophie heard him, every time. She would stand by the sink, twisting her ring, looking down like silence was safer than choosing a side. That hurt more than Grant's questions. A stranger can be greedy, but your child knows exactly where the soft places are. One night, after Grant left, Walter sat in his robe at the kitchen table, his hands thin but his eyes still sharp, and said, "Marion, don't confuse politeness with love." 3 months before he died, Walter asked our attorney, Ada Monroe, to come to the house. Sophie was not told. Grant was not told. Walter was sick, but he knew exactly what he was signing. His doctor wrote it down, Ada recorded every paper properly, and Walter moved the properties into a family trust with me in control for the rest of my life. Sophie would still receive a gift, but only in her name, where no husband or mother-in-law could touch it. So when Grant walked into that estate meeting after the funeral, wearing his charcoal suit and putting his folder closest to the attorney's chair, I noticed. When Irene looked at my pearls like she was already deciding what Sophie should keep, I noticed. And when Sophie sat beside them without once asking if I was holding up, I noticed that most of all. Grant leaned back and said, "We know the important part. The cottages and land passed to Sophie and me." I looked at my daughter first, waiting for one word. Nothing. So I turned back to him and said, "You should let Ada finish." If you were sitting across that table, would Grant's greed have hurt you more, or Sophie's silence?
Ada did not look surprised when she opened the sealed file, and that made the room feel even colder. She read the first page in the same calm voice she used when Walter and I signed those papers in our kitchen 3 months earlier. The cottages, the storefronts, and the waterfront land had all been moved into the Calder family trust before Walter passed, with me as the person in control for the rest of my life. They were not sitting in the estate for Grant to claim, not waiting for Sophie to sign over, not loose enough for Irene to whisper about like groceries on a shelf. Grant stared at Ada, then at the papers, then at me, and I saw the moment his mind stopped acting polite. Irene stepped closer and said, "That can't be right." Ada slid the copies across the table. Signed, dated, notarized, filed with the county. Walter had made sure of every page. Grant grabbed the stack, flipped through it too fast to read, and slapped it down hard enough to shake the water glass beside Sophie's hand. "He was sick," he said. "She pushed him into this." I kept my hands folded in my lap because men like Grant are always hoping an older woman will get emotional enough to make them look reasonable. Ada only opened another page and said, "Walter's doctor confirmed he understood exactly what he was signing." That took the air out of him for 1 second, but only one. By evening, his lawyer had sent a letter claiming Walter was confused and I had isolated him. 2 days later, Sophie called and said she and Grant were coming to stay until the family sorted things out. I told her no. The next morning, they came anyway. 2 suitcases on my porch, Grant in sunglasses, walking up like he had already won. "This is family property," he said through the door. I kept the chain on and said, "No, Grant, this is protected property." He laughed and told Sophie to bring the bags closer. That was when the deputy stepped out of his car behind them. Ada had warned me they might try something, so she had helped me file notice before sunrise. Grant's face changed right there in front of Sophie, Irene, and my neighbor Mrs. Bell, who suddenly became very interested in watering the same dead plant for 5 minutes. But embarrassment did not stop him. It only made him careless. He called old tenants, questioned Walter's doctor, and sent a man downtown asking about our records. So I stopped answering his noise and started checking his. Within 3 weeks, Ada's investigator found unpaid liens, strange consulting invoices, and a business account tied to Grant that Sophie had never mentioned. When the envelope landed on my kitchen table, I understood why he needed our land so badly. He was not chasing wealth. He was trying to outrun trouble. If you were in my place, would you confront him right away, or let him make one more mistake while the proof sat safely in your hands?
I did not take that envelope to Grant the same day, because anger makes people sloppy, and Walter had not spent his last months protecting me so that I could hand our proof to a man who lived on excuses. I put 1 copy in the fireproof box under Walter's workbench, gave 1 to Ada, and kept 1 sealed in my kitchen drawer beside the old recipe cards Sophie used to pull out when she was little. Then I waited. Grant's lawsuit kept moving, but every week he looked smaller inside it. Walter's doctor confirmed he knew exactly what he was signing. The county records showed the trust had been filed before he passed. Ada had every page signed clean, every date correct, every witness ready. Grant could not prove Walter was confused, so he tried a different kind of pressure. He sent a settlement offer, asking for 1 cottage and half the waterfront land in exchange for peace in the family. I read that line twice. peace. The same man who brought suitcases to my porch and called my home family property now wanted to sell me peace with my own land. I called Ada and said, "Now." She sent his attorney the unpaid liens, the strange consulting invoices, and the business account tied to Grant's company with one plain sentence: if he kept making false claims about Walter, those records would be filed in court and sent to the proper authorities. No shouting, no begging, just the truth, placed where charm could not cover it. Grant had 3 days. On the second afternoon, Sophie came alone. No ring, no polished smile, just red eyes, a wrinkled blouse, and a voice so small I almost did not recognize her. She stood in my kitchen and said, "Mom, I didn't know about the money." I believed her, but believing her did not erase the quiet she had chosen while he hurt me. I told her, the money was not what broke my heart. You sitting beside him did. She covered her mouth and cried like something inside her had finally cracked open. I did not hug her right away. I needed her to stand in the truth first. Then she whispered, "I left him." That was when I reached for my daughter, not because everything was fixed, but because she had finally stopped protecting the person who was breaking her. Grant withdrew the case before the deadline. Irene vanished from the fight the moment her name appeared on one of his papers. The judge closed it in a way he could not bring back. The cottages stayed protected. The waterfront land stayed mine. Sophie's inheritance stayed only in her name, safe from the man who had tried to spend it before she ever touched it. 2 months later, I sold one small storefront and used the money to restore the old pier Walter loved. At the end of it, I placed a bench with a brass plate that read, "Walter Calder, who knew quiet strength was still strength." On the first clear morning after it was finished, Sophie brought coffee and sat beside me. We did not pretend nothing happened. We did not rush forgiveness like it was a bill that had to be paid. We just watched the tide move under the boards while the sun warmed the pearls at my ears. Grant lost his business partners, his license went under review, and the man who once called me old learned that old women remember everything. I did not destroy him. I protected what my husband and I built, and I let greed finish the rest. If this happened in your family, could you forgive the daughter who stayed silent once she finally found the courage to walk away?